keep this, a little bit more intimate than some of the other meetings we all may attend. Today we are focused on knowledge-centered service as a topic, but this group really, covers in the past and the future a wide variety of discussions around knowledge management. So if there is, any additional information you'd like on KCS, Monique and the team have links to the Consortium for Service Innovation that came up with this methodology that you can, do that additional research. Everybody was muted automatically when they joined Jeff's Zoom link. And so as we go throughout the presentation, and certainly when we get into the sort of panel discussion and more open audience discussion, you can unmute yourself at any time, but just be aware that you are in control of that. Whereas in the past, we had a webinar where I was kind of doing that. If you unmute yourself, make sure to be aware of it, in other words. The other thing that we thought would be cool, and I've seen, a couple different people do this in meetings, including the consortium, is to rename yourself to not only include your name, but also the company that you work for and your physical location. And so each of us who is presenting today has done that to sort of spur the idea. But if everybody else could do that, I find it's really fun to, make connections. Like maybe I didn't realize there's somebody right down the road from me, who has a similar interest, career interest. So we can start to spur those individual connections as well. The group is growing. We went from about 50 to 150 since our last meeting. So in the future, I'll communicate some sort of more scalable mechanism to host these, to where we maintain it as sort of a, private or semi-private intimate group, but, where we're not sending out invites to everybody that, could be used for spam or, the Zoom drive-bys, et cetera. So for now, I just ask that, you be respectful of the contact information that is shared. And, we might, announce something in the future. And then after the presentation from Jeff, Monique, and Christina, we have a bit of a open-ended panel discussion where we're going to ask others to share their journey with KCS, including, additional best practices that they might want to send to the group. And we've got a couple very distinguished guests to help us with that. So Karen Cerrone happened to work with all of us back at Avaya on their KCS program. And then Kate Leggett is a distinguished analyst over at Forrester who, covers, knowledge and customer service and other topics that, can bring a wealth of experience to that discussion. And then finally, we always are looking for other presenters. So even if, you're not able to join in on today's discussion or in the past, several people have indicated that they'd be interested in doing a presentation. So I will start to reach out to you regarding that. But if you want to proactively shoot me an email and let me know, what subjects you might be the most passionate about covering, that'll help me line up, future sessions so that we have sort of that, ideal combination of a little bit of diversity, but a little bit of consistency as well. And then we're also, as soon as this, COVID thing gets a little bit better, ideally looking to do these as a combination of remote attendance as well as on-site. So for example, Monique and Karen and Jeff and I hosted back when we were all in Denver, one of these where we invited other people from throughout the Denver metro area to join in. And now we can combine that with, technologies like Zoom, where maybe somebody could have one in San Francisco and somebody could have one in Denver and somebody have one in New York. And then everybody, outside of those locations could join in remotely. So I thought that'd be a fun long-term goal for the group. Again, just to make local connections for us all. And then at the very end, we'll be making a donation to the Launchpad Teen Center, which is an organization that I help out with here in my hometown. And we'll also be giving away Logitech StreamCam to one participant. So with those housekeeping items out of the way, Jeff, maybe we could kick off with the introductory poll question, unless I missed anything from your standpoint.
I think we're ready to roll.
Okay, awesome.
So let's take a look at our first question for the day. First question is, describe the current state of KCS at your organization. Drop in there and vote it up. We'll give you about 30 seconds to submit your answer. I want to grab a baseline of where we're at, folks, just to understand where you guys are in your KCS evolution. Been there, done that, still there. Okay, excellent. All right, still about 12 people haven't answered. By the way, a lot of celebrities on the call today. Nice to see you. Look, Sam, Karen, Sarup, my goodness. David, great to see you guys. And I love that you're using Zoom video too, by the way, I just want to say. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and end the poll to share the results out there. It looks like the majority of folks are in a good spot here, actively using with success. I think that's really helpful for our conversation. I think, for those of you that are in the process or looking at KCS, I will say we're going to tell two stories today. So one is kind of the basic evolving. We're just discovering, dipping our toe into the water of KCS here at Zoom, and then eventually transition over to Monique and Christina, who will talk about their actively mature organization. So you're going to get a little bit of each side. Scott, any other thoughts before we go ahead and kick off the presentation?
I say go for it. Thank you.
Okay, excellent. Well, thank you guys. My name is Jeff Harling. I'm going to go ahead and introduce the three panelists for today. Can everybody see my screen okay, and the agenda? Yes, thumbs up. Awesome.
Yep.
Okay, so we're going to talk about, as I said, Zoom's path to KCS. Zoom, as you can imagine, is very early in this process, being a young company. And I will talk a little bit about myself and that journey over the past year or so. Akamai has been doing KCS for quite some time. Monique and Christina will be joining us to talk about how they have evolved KCS to a quite mature state. Frankly, one of the more advanced KCS implementations that I have seen, and I'm very excited to see where KCS can go with them. And then ultimately, we'll talk over a couple of references that you guys can take away from this call. So first things first, quick introductions. I'm going to ask Monique and Christina to also kind of chime in here. So first, as I said, my name is Jeff Harling. For those of you that have not met me before, I've been with Zoom for a little over a year. Zoom is, as you can imagine, is a very young company and has not really deployed many advanced methodologies such as KCS and others in our customer support practice. But over the past year, we really began to kind of level up. And as you can imagine, since the days of COVID, Zoom has become more of a necessity than an interest. So I've been in the knowledge management, content management, self-service space for around 20 years, and worked previously to Zoom at RingCentral, also with Zendesk, Comcast, Avaya, and AT&T. So I've seen digital support scale at large companies and small, and everything in between. And I have to say, every one of them has a different level of interest for me. But so far at Zoom, probably the most exciting adventure, which I'll talk more about in a little bit. So Monique, you want to give a quick intro?
Sure, thanks, Jeff. So my name is Monique Cadena, and I'm also in Colorado, just like Jeff. And I've been in this field for over 20 years. Here at Akamai, I own the KCS program as well as the intelligent swarming program. And I also have a background in communities and self-service. And in 2016, the consortium designated me as an innovator for the work I did to help evolve the KCS methodology. Christina?
Hi, everybody. I'm Christina Roosen. I'm in California. I'm also with Akamai with Monique. I've been there about 2.5 years now, and I am the program manager for the customer community. Monique and I partner very closely, as you'll see when we talk about KCS content and our community. And I have over 20 years experience in support operations, kind of all areas, including communities, especially business intelligence, business process, support processes.
Excellent. Thank you, Monique and Christina. As Scott mentioned in the chat, if you have any questions, please do drop them in the chat, and we'll work to get those questions answered as we progress. And we'll also pause in a few places to take your questions live if you prefer to ask them live instead. So let's talk a little bit about Zoom's path to KCS. As I mentioned, I've been here just a little over a year. When I first joined Zoom, Zoom was really just an evolving company that was in the throes of COVID, as you can imagine. It's become a household name of sorts. But let's take a look back just in prior years, looking back even 2 years in 2019, we're just barely post IPO. We're a young, struggling company that is really beginning to find our footing. Knowledge management practices at Zoom are brand new. Moving into the kind of the pre-COVID era, we're beginning to get noticed and sort of ramping up as a company, beginning to grab market share. Our customer support, while we still have a handle on things, we didn't really see, obviously, what was about to happen for us. So our support volume went through the roof by a factor of 100% in some, or 100 times in some cases, depending on the area. I would say 1 week in March, we were fine. The next we were not. Was a bit of a struggle for us. We realized very quickly that good knowledge sharing practices were something that we probably should have deployed earlier in this state, because it ended up meaning that all of those customers, and I mean millions, tens of millions of customers running to us directly seeking answers. So our customer support organization was absolutely in chaos. We had to put locks in place very quickly, and now we're kind of like subsiding into a new normal, a new level of customer support that is putting us in a space where we are now not competing with startups and small SaaS companies. We are competing with enterprise blue chip companies that have been around for decades, Microsofts and Cisco's of the world. We have to level up our support. We have to level up our knowledge management capability. All of our processes, all of our policies, every single aspect of our customer support organization is up for review and is subject to be changed. And I will tell you right now, we are still reeling and resolving from that era. So going forward, we're really looking at how do we define the strategy around what is important to us in a customer support organization. So first things first, before we even get to KCS, over the past year, we've had to define what are our goals as a customer support organization. As you can imagine, Zoom, if you've heard our CEO speak, the number one thing that he always says is ensuring that customers are happy. He doesn't care about any other metric first. It is making customers happy and giving them an enjoyable experience in their Zoom product usage. So customer satisfaction, of course, is our number one goal. To stay in business as a company, we also have to look at other, bottom line impacting metrics such as contact deflection, ensuring that user experience is a good one, automation and revenue, of course. But then we have to overlay what are the expected outcomes for each of those goals. If we drive happy customers, they will never leave us. If we can drive contact deflection, we need to have just-in-time answers for them. If we want a better user experience, they will have content that is there, easy to find, easy to use. If we drive automation, we must ensure that virtual experience is important enough to be focused on, that it will drive a human-like experience for those customers. And lastly, while revenue is not something that generally you would see in a support organization set of goals, it does ensure that we are reducing churn and driving up upgrade ability for us. If the customers are indeed happy with our product, they'll continue, as I said, in number one, stay there, and they'll always want more. So that was our goals and strategy. And then next, once we understand where it is we're heading as a customer support organization, we then, as a self-service team, we have to identify what is really the primary value that we can deliver for our customers before anything else, before we build a website, before we promote a new Zoom community. What is it that we need above all? And that is knowledge. But we have to identify the value of knowledge. And I would say it's simpler than you think, right? First, accept the fact that knowledge is the answer. As a customer support organization, I don't care who you are, any customer support organization, the customers come to you for one thing, that's solutions. They're not coming to ask you about the weather or tell you how wonderful you are. They're coming because they have a need. Their need is knowledge. And so knowledge is the answer. I think that companies that have come to realize that knowledge is first and foremost in any kind of customer experience, then I think the rest is easy. then you have to convince everyone of that, right? So once everyone is on board that knowledge and the sharing of knowledge is the answer to all of your customer experience concerns as the first priority, then you can fix everything else after that. But is it that simple? So we set about this process of really building a team. But we had a small knowledge-based team, but not necessarily formalized around industry practices, KCS, consortium best practices, and so forth. So Zoom set out to build a knowledge-based team. We scaled up to more than double the size of the original team. We then aligned ourselves with the customer support team that we had not previously been aligned with. Traditionally, we have been more of a product-focused team where we worked directly with our product management and product development teams to get content out. But creating a new alignment with our customer support team was important because why? As you can imagine, the customers are calling us, chatting with us, emailing us, submitting web tickets 24/7. Our customer support organization has their ear to the ground on every issue, and alignment with our customer support organization was far more important, we realized, than understanding what our product team suggested that we deliver in content. So that was a key first step for us. Next, identifying what were our success measures. Content, obviously, knowledge is the answer, as we've stated. We needed to identify what those success measures are, and I'll talk a little bit about those in a few moments. Next, we needed to get our team trained. We determined that KCS was the methodology for us because of the goals we had set. We were determined that collaboration was the only way that we were going to make our customer experience better through knowledge. So knowledge-centered service training was now provided to our entire KB team, also to all of our frontline managers. So we have every one of them now have gone through training. There's a couple dozen of them, and now we are, as leaders, are all trained and in fact certified. So an additional step of encouragement for all of those frontline managers and our KB authors was that they could get a certification that they could take with them, put on their resume, and take going forward. So that drove an additional interest for them to understand what KCS was all about, and of course the importance of it. Next, we built an enablement model. So this enablement model is now the model that we used to enable all of our frontline associates. Zoom has about 1,100 frontline associates in Tier 1, Tier 2, technical account management, and other roles related to frontline customer support. It was important that we shared this wealth across all of those employees. Every single one of those Tier 1, Tier 2 associates received training, or is in the process of receiving training now, and all new associates must go through KCS training to understand the importance of this. So it had to be universal for us. And then lastly, measuring that success. And as I said, we're going to talk a little bit about measuring success. Zoom is early in this process, so I'm going to give you kind of a stunted view, but I think as we move into Monique and Christina's presentation, it will make sense what an evolved KCS organization looks like. So with that, we have a second poll question for you.
Actually, Jeff, real quick, one question from the chat. How many members are present in the KB team? And maybe you can break it down by coaches, et cetera, as well.
Yeah, our KB team, we're still following a traditional model with the KB team. We have, with open headcount, we have 12 associates on that KB team. And so that team of 12 is supporting, like I said, 1,100 associates, agents, frontline managers, et cetera, currently. Okay, we'll talk a little more about the traditional versus the evolved KB team model. So I'm going to launch the second poll question. So the second poll question for you is, how well does your company culture support knowledge sharing? I'm sure every one of us have bumped into this question in some way, shape, or form. Okay. Oh. Okay, I've got way more participants in this one than I did the last. Good. All right, just a few more seconds here. We've got about 8 people left. Okay, with that, I'm going to go ahead and close the poll and share the results with you. And it looks like the majority of folks actively knowledge share, but it's not company wide. I think that's fairly common. I would say in my experience, it's common that you will see, spurts of this all over the organization, but to really have a top down knowledge sharing culture, it is quite difficult. But what's encouraging is that 39% of you guys do have that actively across your organization. So 4 out of 10, that's pretty good, actually. I think, David, Karen might argue that if we went back 10 or 15 years, that those numbers would not nearly be as high. So that's good news in this industry. Thank you. All right, so back to the presentation. So let's talk a little bit about some dilemma that we have bumped into here at Zoom. No good knowledge management program or practice is deployed without some drama, without some step in the process where we bump into some competing agendas, competing needs, goals, etc. For us, it was that our internal organization had already begun taking steps in the path of developing their own knowledge base. Our agents had determined that, for them to be better agents at supporting their customers, they needed to build this Confluence wiki page, and they would capture knowledge, store it there for their own use. But of course, what does that do for our customers? It requires them to call us, chat us, or email us to get to that knowledge. And that's a bit of a challenge for us right now at Zoom. It's something we've been working through over the last a couple of months, because that was a process that was already in place before we started our knowledge management and KCS practice. We are now, essentially negotiating with that team to work on a more a collaborative effort so that we can ensure that self-serviceable content comes out of that agent knowledge base and is moved out to the self-service space on the web where the customers can use it directly without having to interact with us. Because as we know, if customers have to chat with us, if they have to send us a web ticket, their dissatisfaction is much higher in that case, as opposed to just giving them the simple answer out on the web. So I'm curious from you guys, just in the chat, or you can open up your mics. I'm curious, do you agree that ultimately knowledge should exist in a single KB for both internal and external? And what model do you guys see? I'm opening it up. Anyone?
Looks
Yay,
like
combined.
everyone's agreeing.
Everyone's agreeing. That's perfect. It's okay in chat too. I get that folks are shy.
Hey, Jeff, it's Sarah Mebin, and I got to give a little shout out that, one way, in addition to having one knowledge base, of course, but to have knowledge in different areas, not knowledge capital K. We bridge that gap using, drum roll, Coveo, which I bet a lot of the companies on this call leverage Coveo too. So I had to give Scott a little shout out there.
Yeah. Well, fun fact, we are in the process of implementing Coveo as we speak. So I'm super excited about what that future will bring us. I think that, Sarah, you bring up a great point. I gave the simplest of use cases where we just have, an agent knowledge base and an external customer facing knowledge base. There are many other KBs. Molly is our knowledge management leader. She's on this call with us, and I think she can tell you that this knowledge exists all over the company, and this is not uncommon from what I've seen, in my past experience as well. So we're looking just to simplify between those two, but yeah, it's a much bigger puzzle to solve for sure.
Yeah, and this isn't by any means a Coveo webinar, but obviously since the cat's out of the bag, and this is Scott Badeau. One of the reasons why I've enjoyed working with so many of you across a variety of different platforms is the technology is now available to create a single source from an end user's perspective, but on the back end, right, you've got agent authored content, you've got community threads, that sort of thing. It's just so dramatically different than when, let's say, Jeff and Monique and Karen and I started working together. The concepts were there, but it was a lot more difficult. And it just seems like embracing that diversity has really helped a lot of the organizations that I have observed. So.
Thank you, Scott, for that. Definitely not a Coveo commercial, but if you want to talk to me about Coveo, this will be the second company I've worked with it leveraging Coveo. I'm happy to share a few fun stories about them. They are great. Okay, so moving on. So I again, Zoom in its early adoptive state, I wanted to share with you what the most basic of KCS flows look like for us currently. This particular model here is what we're currently in the process of deploying. Just again, a year into this process, it has been a bit of a slow slog. We've been, working on a number of content efforts, as well as, like I said, convincing, bringing folks in, getting them trained, developing the processes, and so forth. This is the basic model that we look to implement first. Later on, Monique and Christina are going to show you a very advanced version of this. But for us, it's just as simple as us determining whether the knowledge exists for the customer or does not. If they have to contact us directly into customer support, can we capture and move that information back to the self-service space? There is still that there is a peel off for the agents in some case, those technical support engineers that do create their own knowledge base. But that's an issue that we're currently looking to solve. But I think this is a very simplistic approach to what KCS is all about. Also useful for those of you that never have seen KCS. The ultimate mantra here is that we're only solving problems one time. If a problem has not yet been solved in some knowledge base article or some documented knowledge source, then this cycle ensures that it is once it's been identified by our customers. Which brings me to poll question number 3. I will launch that now. I'm curious, we're curious, which of the following is the #1 reason your organization is not sharing knowledge? I love that. We share everything. No worries here. Lots of folks jumping on that. Oh, that's good. Okay. #1 reason. Wow. Okay. This is interesting. Okay, just a few more folks to respond. Give about 5 more seconds. Find your poll question, get your answer in there. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and close the poll. Let's share the results. Okay, it looks like #1, we don't have enough time to share. So interesting about this particular response, because folks are saying they don't have enough time to share, that KCS, one of the primary values behind KCS is how it can help to drive efficiency, how it can help to improve our organization and make it much more streamlined. Contact deflection, as you noticed, was one of the top goals of our Zoom organization, and I think that's probably true for a lot of customer support organizations. If we can indeed invoke KCS in the proper fashion, time is what we'll get. So interesting that that's a bit of a catch-22 for us as well. I do like the fact that 15% of us said that we share everything. No worries here, so that's good. Thank you guys for answering to that. So let me jump into, I'm sorry, my next slide. So as I said, we're early in the KCS adoptive state. We are looking at some simple metrics, but you'll notice that we haven't quite got to the point where we've really evolved out our analytics base. We're going to see more of that with Christina in just a few, but for us, it's what is it that we can do to get the wheels turning, to understand the most basic of dashboard components that we can encourage across 3 places: across our KB authors to get content published quickly, to get our agents to contribute and attach their knowledge articles, any knowledge articles that they are using to cases, and rate them on recommendation, and then also the content itself, the performance of the content. So I picked the 3 simplest of metrics across each of those to keep us very focused. And then as you can see, some of them are fuzzed out because we are still building. We have not got to a point where we can look at it in a more evolved metric state yet. But I think that's the reason that I illustrate this, is because it's important to not overwhelm yourself at the beginning. If you overly complicate what you're trying to do at the onset, you will throw everybody off the rails. It will become more difficult to implement. You need to kind of feed people a little bit at a time to bring them along into the KCS process. And then lastly, where are we headed? as I kind of illustrated, we're baselining where we are right now, beginning to collaborate in places such as this, working with the consortium, taking KCS training, getting certified, bringing folks up to speed, starting to drive and report adoption measures within our agent and our customer organization. We're looking at implementing advanced KCS tactics, which are going to be really next up for us once we feel like we've got a level of comfort that everybody's on board. They're convinced that knowledge is still the answer, and we can begin to move forward into the next phase. And then we will cross the street, so to speak, to yet a better side. So I'm going to jump over to Monique, and she's going to tell us all about what they're doing over at Akamai. I'm sorry, about with their KCS program. Monique,
Hey,
take
Monique,
it away.
sorry to interrupt, but there was
Yeah.
one question from the chat on Zoom about who improves the articles in that model.
That's a great question, Ryan. Thank you. So this is really a combined effort. So it occurs not just in the agent space, but also in our KB author state. As I mentioned earlier, we're in a more of a primitive KB author, KB team state, compared to more advanced KCS models. And so we still have a high dependency on the KB authors to work directly with product managers to validate and improve that content. Sometimes it is based on a flagging mechanism. People notify us, we also have a form that folks can come and fill out that suggests that there be improvements to content, and we go track those down. A little bit of old school, but yeah, we're working on that one. So I will flip it over to Monique, who's going to talk to us about Akamai. Monique?
Thanks, Jeff. So I'm going to share with you what it may look like further down the KCS path and some of the pitfalls to avoid along the way. So Akamai's tried this a couple of times before really nailing it. And this statement here is from our VP of Support and Services, Scott Lerner. And he stated that Akamai needed to do a complete reboot as if they had never done it before in order to reap the benefits and address some of the problems, because doing it correctly means baking it into daily operations. And it was obvious at the end of our implementation, the time that we invested in doing it right has made our program scalable, repeatable, and thriving. So what did we do? Next slide. In Q2 is when we started, and this was back in 2017, and they put a big halt on KCS, or what they thought was KCS at the time. And they said, just stop doing everything, stop linking, stop writing, just stop. And so then they started by investing in a program owner, and that's when I came on board. And after that, we moved very, very quickly because they had already, started writing new requirements for the tools and everything. And so that year and going into the next year, it was the top priority. So all hands were on deck. By the end of 2017, we had actually trained everyone in every role. So to Jeff's point, engineers, managers, directors, and even our VP at the time attended some form of training. And we're about 500 people at that time. And then in 2018, we really focused on the adoption and continued that into 2019, which is also when we started thinking about building a knowledge domain expert program to do some of the Evolve Loop domain activities. And one of those that I thought was really interesting was expanding the use of our KCS data into problem management, which we did a PLC at the end of 2019, which is wildly successful. And so in 2020, we rolled that out, and we were able to do more sprints than we had ever done in the past. And last year, with a lot of engineers really moving to different parts of the company, we had a lot of new hires. And so we did a lot of communications and targeted training. And so, because those people weren't around to kind of hear some of the clarifications and things that we had to address in the stream. And so this year we're starting by taking what we've learned, enhancing our training, and really kind of plugging in some of those gaps. So we've been at it for a while now, and what you see here on this slide are the results that we saw in the first 6 months. And they continue to be maintained or even improved in some cases. For example, our time to mitigation savings, it's improved even further. It's gone high 40s, sometimes it's hit 50s. And there is that curve depending on where it was in the program rollout. But the reason I love showing the initial benefits is because this was still during the learning curve. Those first 6 months when not everyone was trained, they were still learning how to capture in the workflow. And that misconception of I don't have enough time, that's gone. We blew that out of the water. So if you look at this here, that time to mitigation and how much time we're actually saving or solving cases faster, that also includes when an engineer takes time to capture brand new articles or to update articles. So not just reusing content. So you can really see that it's improving efficiency. Next slide.
Hey, Monique, this is Scott. One of the things I find is a common challenge is people don't know how to actually report on metrics like that. Could you just spend 45 seconds or so talking about some of the methods and combination of tools you've used?
Yeah. So we have some out of the box reports from our CRM, which we use Salesforce. And so we look at cases that have knowledge-based articles linked to them, and we look at the average time of handling a resolution when that was actually mitigated. And then we compare that also to the same cases where they are not linking KB articles. So what I thought was really interesting in that scenario is we thought, well, is this just like a coincidence or is this really happening? And so I actually did some trending and went back all the way to pre-reboot. And again, they were trying to do KCS, right? They were doing writing articles and stuff. And it's interesting because it's actually the opposite. So it was actually taking them longer when they tried to kind of do it in a knowledge engineering way. So yeah, comparing those cases, looking at is there a KB article linked? Is there not one linked? And then looking at the average time for those.
Yeah, and this is Karen. We do something very similar here. We use ServiceNow and they have performance analytics. And again, it's looking at the cases and their mean time to resolve versus that have attached knowledge and those that don't have attached knowledge, and being able to make those comparisons. And we look at also we've calculated a efficiency rating. And so we can show that teams that use and link knowledge are 25 to 40% more efficient than teams that don't. Very effective and compelling, especially when you're trying to bring on teams that are resisting the change. Say, this is what your counterparts are doing and see how much more effective they are.
It's definitely a good thing to have in your pocket for those resistors. So going back to thinking about, okay, well, why did things work this time and what was different? We went back to some of the leaders that were involved and we asked them that question. And they realized, oh yeah, it's not, we can't take shortcuts, or we can't a la carte pick certain pieces of KCS and just do that. So it was really following the adoption guide and a huge investment in coaching for tools, time, and training, which is where I feel people often skip over because they think the ROI is not there or some other reason. And I can tell you that every time that I've implemented coaching or have done a reboot or had an acquisition where they didn't have coaches and we added that, we saw an improvement in any kind of KPI, key performance indicator that they were looking at for adoption or health. And to give you a good example, back at Avaya, we had 1,500 knowledge workers who all had full-blown publisher permissions, meaning they can independently author and publish to the support site externally on their own without any kind of review. And they were producing high quality content and met the criteria. And a part of that reason was because they'd all been there a long time. There was not a lot of turnover and they'd been doing KCS for years. Back to, when initially Jeff and Karen implemented KCS at Avaya, right? So they already knew what KCS was, even though they may not have known it by that particular name. And so when we started thinking about coaching, the question was, well, is there even a need? Because they get it. Look at the articles, they're beautiful. So there was, because even though the quality was high, there's so many more things that happen in the solve loop. So for example, searching early, searching often, the case integration, thinking about that workflow efficiency. And those were some of the weak points or opportunities that coaching was able to address with. And so even in the pilot, we saw a 25% reduction in that time to mitigation in the first month, because now people were understanding the solve loop better. Next slide. So coaching falls into the people aspect of driving change. And the other things that were different, we listed here by people, process, and technology. And so for process, it's really critical to use organizational change management, or OCM, because KCS is a large transformation effort. I want to say it's 60%, maybe even higher, just OCM. The tooling, that's easy, right? You address that, you train people, but the whole OCM piece and the coaching, that's something very different. And so if you are just, in your journey where you're looking at enhancing or implementing, and you need to find somebody to help steer the ship, find somebody who is heavy in OCM, because they can use their influencing skills to help the organization adopt it much better, and make sure that they're also following the practices guide very closely. Another process item is focus on blending KCS and case management. So we teach everyone that they really are one thing. And oftentimes when people say, I don't have time, or I'm struggling with KCS, and we go and we sit down and we okay, let's go through this. It's not KCS they're struggling with, it's case management. It's documenting the case with, good, diligent case notes. And so if you can get people to see that they really are one, and if you just address case management and do that correctly, KCS then becomes very easy. And so when it comes to technology, right, because you need that as a dependent to make it easy for them, one of the things to think about is a solid integration with the case. So this way they can also visually see them as one. We leverage a one-click option, and I'll show you that on the next slide. But it's also important to stay on top of the KCS evolutions. So KCS, yes, has been around for 20 years, but it continues to evolve. And one of the things that you will see in a mature environment are knowledge workers following the 90-0 rule. So that's been added in version 6. And it's not a goal. What it is an indicator of a behavior, which is you train and coach your people to edit or capture new articles and publish them before the case is closed. So this means that tacit knowledge is captured, timely publishing of articles for both internal use and self-service, without having to predict the future demand, because we can't do that. We're not fortune tellers, right? So the other thing that it also does, you'll find, is now you don't have to worry about a big draft backlog sitting there, because now it's just mainly evolve loop articles that were created outside of the workflow. This slide here is an example of what our engineers see. The case and the knowledge widget are on the same homepage. So on the right, you can search for and preview knowledge. And if you need to create something front and center, we have an option called Quick Article. And so that actually takes the notes. So again, teaching them diligent case notes, and it copies them over to the mapped article fields. And you see that correlation there in that blue box as well. So now articles are just a matter of cleanup for reuse and structuring according to the KCS style guide. So another reason coaching is important is because they're your change agents. And studies have shown that training alone will increase productivity by 22%. But when you support it with coaching, it's an 86% increase, because now it's constantly in front of them. And the bottom line is that the average ROI is 6 times the cost of coaching, and it leads to consistent, replicable results. When it comes to data on adoption and health, we've realized that if you if you stop talking about all those traditional KPIs that you might be looking at for adoption, like linking and creation and edits and so on, and you just focus on coaching, all of the other things fall into place because they're addressing those behaviors. And so for KCS, there's one, we have lots of reports, but there's one that our VP of support looks at weekly, and that's coaching. Is it happening? And early on, we focused on that coaching, and like a bunch of dominoes that fell into place, linking went higher than ever before, and accuracy was higher than ever before, and duplicates dropped. Everything organically fell into place because during coaching, again, we're focusing on the behaviors. So we're managing by behaviors and not by the numbers. And so we stopped talking about those numbers with people. This is an example of how we made it easier for coaches to do their job. And in one view, they can see their coaches that are assigned to them, what KCS licensing permissions they have, and those other traditional indicators. But everyone in our organization knows, not as part of the ongoing, the initial training and the ongoing comms that we did, is that we don't put goals on activities. And that is just a core principle of KCS. And this coaching dashboard is really just to help facilitate the discussion. And also another key thing to remember is that everybody grows and learns at their own speed. So it doesn't matter what that speed is in comparison to others on your team, as long as you're growing. And that was another big change management effort that we needed, to spend a lot of time on. And so the lesson really is, don't place a timed licensing goal on everyone, because they will meet it. They will absolutely meet it, but some of them may revert to those old habits because those behaviors are not baked into their DNA. So lastly, it was obvious that our coaching model really did build a strong foundation, so much so that when it came to case quality, we modeled our case reviews and coaching after our KCS coaching program. So now we have checklists that are similar to the content standard checklist, or you might know it as AQI, the old name. We now have checklists on cases, transitions, and escalations. And I've talked a ton about education and change management, but one big item I can't forget is educate your leaders and managers to, again, manage by behaviors and not by numbers. It is not black and white. Even all the data in the world, if you put it in lovely dashboards, it still requires interpretation. So we do have a lot of other KCS data. Some of it is used by me to assess the health of the program and steer their program. But that leaves the question, what else can data be used for? So I'm actually going to hand it off to Christina, and she's going to talk about educating the organization and some of the ways that we use data in KCS and self-service.
Thanks, Monique. And before I get started, we're going to actually ask a couple of questions about measures of all of you. So the first poll question we're going to ask, what do you measure today as part of your knowledge management practice? What kinds of things do you measure?
Give another 20
no
seconds.
metrics. Yeah, 20 seconds. And no measures is a perfectly acceptable answer. Not everybody's link or attach rate. You can select multiple in this question. I'm glad to see a lot of people are measuring self-service success. I'm going to talk a lot about that. Okay.
Great. Okay,
Yep.
we'll go ahead and end the poll and share the results.
So participation and link rate is a pretty standard measure and really important one to measure. I'm going to talk a little bit in my presentation about the next two metrics, case abandonment and deflection versus self-service success. So interesting answers here. Not as much agent-focused metrics as I'd think. One more poll question before I start my presentation. How effective is your organization at measuring the value? Value is kind of a loaded word, so I'll be interested to see what people think. Some of the benefits, not at all. couple more seconds. Okay.
Okay, we'll end it.
So it looks like a lot of people have started to do some value measurements, and that's great. A few of you are still working on it. So what I'm going to talk about in my presentation is take us on a quick dive into measuring KCS value from a little bit different angle than what Monique talked about. I'm going to talk about it from the self-service angle. So the Akamai community, the program that I run, is an engagement and collaboration platform like most online communities. And it's also where our knowledge base gets exposed to our customers. So the community program team is really reliant on KCS as the content engine for our site. And one of our goals is to maximize the use of that content. So we really focus on 3 areas to help us do this on the community side. Digital enablement is really just about improving and tuning the experience to make self-service content, easy to find, easy to use. Collaboration may seem out of place here since we're talking about self-service, but our community engagement team highlights self-service content whenever they can, recommending knowledge in response to those community questions where there is already a documented answer and hoping that our members learn how to fish for themselves. And lastly, we've been working to incorporate self-service into every conversation we have about support delivery and measuring success. This is what I'm going to focus on, measuring and communicating KCS self-service value. So before we start talking about metrics themselves, I think it's useful to take a step back and maybe reframe the way we talk about support delivery. Far too often we think about it only in the context of responding to cases. But if you think more broadly about the business of providing support, and Jeff talked about this, what we're doing is delivering value in response to a customer need, in response to demand. That demand can come from our customers in a variety of forms: phone calls, emails, chat, visits to our site, questions in the community. And that demand can fluctuate based on any number of factors that are in our control or not in our control. Seasonality, world events like the pandemic, even your own product releases and other programs. But the job of support remains in that ever-shifting landscape to provide a great customer experience that is also cost-effective for the business. So the key here is I want to think beyond cases when I talk about delivering support value. Next slide. So I'm going to drill a little bit further into how we meet demand by looking at the different ways we can provide value. Think of this diagram as kind of flowing from left to right. Our customers reach out to us because they have a need. They want to resolve an issue or get an answer to a question. I'm sorry, there we go. Sorry, my screen blanked out for a moment. This is the incoming support demand. As that demand comes in, it can flow into a variety of channels to be handled. Some channels are more resource intensive for the business, and generally that means they're slower for the customer as well. So as we move from left to right in this flow, time, cost, and customer effort are all increasing. So we want to handle as far left as we can. We all know that more and more customers are happy to find an answer on their own. We hear it from all sorts of studies and publications. And this is particularly true with low priority issues, which is where self-service really shines. And our KCS content tends to handle that demand, that portion of the demand. But if we're focusing all our energy and measurements on the assisted channel portion of this diagram, we're paying the most attention to the most costly and highest effort parts of our delivery. And we're potentially ignoring a big part of the value landscape, that self-service branch. I do want to pause here before I move on with a quick note. While digital customer experience is a huge area of focus, assisted support is sometimes absolutely what the customer needs, and there is no substitute, especially in an urgent situation or a brand new issue or a hot customer, right? So I actually make it a rule not to talk about deflecting or avoiding cases in our support language. I'm not judging anyone who does. I'm just saying in our conversations, we try not to talk about it that way. We talk instead in terms of helping incoming demand flow into the channel that works best for everyone, one that's the lowest possible effort for the customer, one that they may already prefer, and it does also happen to be more efficient for the business. Okay, next slide. So let's look at how we might be able to measure all of that self-service value we're delivering. We are very used to quantifying and analyzing value delivered by support using case as a metric. It's a well understood record of a support delivery, often with more data than you know how to use. And now I want to expand that frame to include customer use of our knowledge content in that value delivery story. So how do we quantify that? Here it is at a very high level. Basically, some percentage of the visits to your knowledge base will result in a person finding an answer. That's a self-service success. That's what we want to count as a support delivery. The some percentage of visits portion of that statement is where the art and science comes in. Until somebody invents a fully psychic knowledge base, there is a level of assumption we will have to make about how many customers were successful. We base that assumption on data like survey data or maybe customer experience research, clickstream analysis, whatever other tools we have in our tool belt. And this is a much bigger topic than I can cover here. So I'll refer you to the Consortium for Service Innovation's website, where a project called Understanding Success by Channel dug into exactly this question and came up with some recommendations and best practices. And my participation in that project is actually behind a lot of what I'm presenting to you right now. Great conversations were had there. So let's, same slide. So let's assume we've worked the necessary magic to quantify our successes. Now I can look at our overall support delivery in the simple view in this graph, okay? And I can trend it over time to see changes. According to this very rosy picture, over time, I've increased the use of self-service, and as a result, it's now providing over half of my support delivery. Some important things to consider if you're thinking about introducing this kind of measure for your own business, something we thought about with some change management at Akamai. First thing, the key is I'm not looking to hit some magic targeted volume of successes. There is no magic number. Instead, I'm looking to increase the percentage of my demand that gets satisfied by a self-service solution. I'm using my own data to decide what that percentage should be, the increase. So I'm trending and comparing against myself, showing change over time. I also like to plot projects and activities on the timeline because it's a way to let me easily visualize the impact of improvements I might make to self-service delivery. And it's always important in any metric you're presenting to communicate context, like Monique said. I think this is especially true with metrics generated by customer behavior, which is what this is. For example, the first year I began tracking this type of data at Akamai, we had a significant dip in activity in the late April, early May timeframe that I observed. And I know now that we have a lot of site traffic from Japan, and that's when Golden Week falls in most of the countries out of the office. But without that context, it was very easy to interpret the data as a problem or an issue I needed to solve. So now we've talked about quantity, let's talk about cost. So we know why we're looking at this segment of support delivery, because it's value that we're delivering, it's powered by KCS, talked about how to quantify it. The next step is to think about how we assign a cost so we can do further analysis. Just like the commonly used cost per case figure that a lot of organizations use, cost per self-service is a valuable metric for you to determine. And I'll show you why on the next slide. But just like cost per case, the calculation is made up of two parts, basically. Your total costs divided by the volume. And the key here is when I'm thinking about calculating the total cost it takes to deliver self-service knowledge to my customers, I'm not going to count the cost of creating the knowledge articles, right? Those articles are a product of my KCS program. It's already providing me benefits. I am reusing that content in true KCS fashion for my customers. Generally speaking, you only want to include the incremental costs of surfacing that content for your customers. So this could be some platform costs or licensing costs, maybe some program management costs, if you've got people dedicated to doing that. If you've got any additional activities you have to undertake before you publish externally, like a legal review or translation, you may want to include those costs here as well. But because we're not including the cost to create knowledge, and because one article can potentially provide an answer to many people, we can expect our cost per self-service success to be significantly lower than cost per case. Okay, which takes us to the next slide. This is where all that data I've been talking about really starts to tell a story about the value of KCS and self-service. And it's when I use it in this example to demonstrate the ROI of shifting customer demand into this less costly channel. This is a simple example using a fictitious company. So my fictitious company has calculated our support delivery costs at $25 a case and $1 per self-service success. Last year, 300,000 cases and about 100,000 self-service successes. So I'm currently only delivering 25% of my support through self-service. And I think there are some great opportunities to make some improvements, because based on what I know about our cases at my fictitious company, our customers, our architecture, I think we can shift 5% of that assisted demand into self-service. If I play those numbers out, I can see that shifting just 20,000 cases into the lower cost channel means I can avoid $480,000 in support delivery costs, assuming the demand were exactly flat. I can also look at it as maybe an ability for my overall demand in my business to grow 5% without an increase in assisted support infrastructure. Either story works. So I'm not going to pretend that every calculation will be this straightforward or story this clear, because complexities are going to arise as soon as you start to factor in your own business context. I would suggest you also work with your finance team to help play out some of these numbers, and they'll always add some additional complexities to your calculation. But it's a way to build a really effective and impactful story about why investing in KCS to build content for your self-service ecosystem is so valuable to your organization. Last point I want to make is about a little bit different. I'm going to shift a little bit different use of our self-service data, and that's how our knowledge, our KDEs use community data to improve the self-service ecosystem itself. So Akamai's KDEs are an incredible team of superstars, and they make great use of this data to drive improvements. These are just some of the items that they work on. So harvesting community conversations for content that may have never made it into a case, but should be captured regardless. Looking at top rated or most viewed articles using web page view information to improve best practices by identifying what made the article particularly effective or popular with our customers, ensuring that searches return great content, keeping an eye out for new or increasingly popular search terms to make sure we've got self-service content to meet it. And since we do demand-based translation, our team also uses geographical page view data to help prioritize translation activities. So bottom line is, as the KDEs help increase adoption of knowledge for self-service, they get even more data from the community to work with, which creates a great continuous improvement loop for knowledge that directly is incorporating the customer's usage of knowledge content through self-service. I'm going to hand it back to Monique to wrap up.
Thanks, Christina. So in closing, you saw each of us touch on some considerations, and there's so much more that we didn't touch on. So we wanted to leave you with some references. Keep this one in mind. As you may have noticed when looking at companies, KCS doesn't always look exactly the same. So you might be wondering, why is that? So this actually helps illustrate why. It's from the KCS version 6 practices guide. So in order to maximize benefits, the fundamental principles and core concepts, those right in the middle that are close, those are not negotiable, right? So reference the guide often. Outside of core items, companies need to decide how to approach challenges that might be unique to your organization or business. So it's going to be things like tools or even staffing. Next slide. Regardless of those challenges, there's a ton of resources out there. The consortium is where we go to deep dive, learn, and share. And there's also some free public items that they have out there for reference also. And one of those is called the KCS in Actions webinar that the consortium presents every month. And also there's one coming up next month on February 24th, so you can go visit their page and register for it. It's free, open to the public. But Christina and one of our Akamai KDEs will be presenting on how KDEs turn data into continuous improvement. And so one thing to kind of keep in the back of your mind too is KCS is never done. There's always the need for continuous improvement, no matter how mature your program is. And, you know, just on a personal note, every professional needs to have that continuous education to stay up to date in their field. And for me, it's been the consortium. And I've been, privileged to work for companies that have always had memberships, or they've gotten memberships once they found out what it was. Because even though KCS has been around for a long time, it's still evolving, right? But not only that, but you get to, learn and share and other emerging practices that are part of the entire ecosystem. So KCS is the foundation, and there's all these other things that go on in the ecosystem that are emerging work from the consortium. So things like intelligent swarming and predictive customer engagement and leadership framework. So great resource. And I was not paid to say that. I just a big fan. So now I'm actually going to turn it back to either Scott or Jeff.
Thanks, Monique.
Scott, take it away. Yes.
Speaking of the consortium, let's see, they recently had a couple posts on social media celebrating their 30th year together. And, we're privileged enough to have some folks on this call today that have been around, that group for a while, including, I think if John Schmay is still on, he helped author the original practices guide, I think possibly with David as well. I just wanted to share a fun memory of mine that I posted on LinkedIn as, one of the member meetings, I think 15 or 16 years ago that David invited me to, and you couldn't ask for a better location than where the consortium meetings are held. I mean, we've been in Napa. This is one in Beaver Creek, Colorado. We're roasting marshmallows, et cetera. So if for no other reason, you should join to not only get the information, but to meet up with your colleagues in some pretty amazing places rather than, the Hilton Airport Hotel in Chicago or something. Just before we move on to the panel discussion, I wanted to mention that, one of the passions of mine in doing this group is to kind of mix business with pleasure, so to speak. So in addition to, getting us all together, I'm a big fan of, donations to charitable events when they happen at, like Salesforce does this at Dreamforce, et cetera. So one of the, charities that I wanted to highlight, in case anybody's interested, that, I made this donation and then my employer will match, is the Launchpad. And they're a local teen youth center here in the community that I live in. And this photo is actually real. They're crammed into this small little house currently where people are practicing musical instruments. They're on the computer, getting tutored for folks that may be behind at school. And then they're doing some mentoring programs. And this individual on the left here got a $15,000 inheritance from her grandmother many years ago and decided to use it to launch this concept. And it's now turned into, these are some photos that I took recently where they're building a new building that's, tens of thousands of square feet here. This is about half of it. And then I swung by the other day where they're doing the painting of that. And, they've got local contractors donating their time and resources, as well as the kids and volunteers doing that. So I just thought it'd be kind of a fun thing to mix, a few tangential elements into our get-togethers here. And, at the last one, for those of you who weren't there, we made a donation, David K and I, to an orphanage that Linda King, a dear colleague of many of ours, who was just as great of a host with knowledge management types of topics as she was personally. And she passed away peacefully on an airplane flight over to that orphanage in India to volunteer there. So we thought it was a perfect, mechanism or idea to coincide with this group. And I just wanted to circle back on that idea and let everybody know that the donations in her name, including so many that you all made during that last webinar we had together, have amounted to their ability to build and name a building after her in that honor. So that was just, for me, the knowledge management stuff will go on as long as our careers do, but this memory of Linda will go on forever. And so with that said, I'd like to hand it over to the entire audience for discussion of these topics that we've gone over today. And we will be giving away a Logitech StreamCam. I did get, the one mention I'll make of Coveo is, I got them to pay for a little giveaway here. So I'm going to mix it up a little bit and say that anybody who participates in the next section is eligible for the StreamCam. So you can't just sit and watch. We really want to learn from you just as much as we've learned from our distinguished presenters. And with that in mind, I'll call out a few people who can help facilitate this. I mentioned, Karen Cerrone is on, who was, involved very intimately with a program that Monique and Jeff did at Avaya, and I had the pleasure of helping out with them as a consultant. We've also got, Kate Leggett from Forrester, who I had the pleasure of working with back at Kana. And then again, we've got John Schmay, David Kay, some of the original authors of, the KCS processes. I think Phil Vergas had a drop, but, many others, Ryan, I've seen, Kristen, so we'd love to sort of, maybe start with what subtopics everybody is interested in discussing. If you want to throw those in the chat or, verbally mention them, and we can kind of narrow down on what the group might, best benefit from. Some of the ones that I noticed in the chat thread, there seemed to be a lot of interest either in the public chat or a few private messages sent to me around what Karen Cerrone mentioned around the efficiency measures. And then we've, coaching is always, I think, a challenge. People either don't understand it or have had challenges with it. I'll throw one out from my standpoint. I'm huge in self-service success. So not, deflection and sort of the obvious metrics, but the broader things like, is what we're doing making our customers not only more satisfied and more happy with their support interaction, but are they adopting our product more, right? And when I say adoption, I don't mean so that they can renew at a 5% uplift or whatever. I mean, are we making their life better, similar to the iPhone and, some of the consumer things we're all used to? Are we making their life better by better educating them on how to use our product? And then I know intelligent swarming is one that's been going around, but with that, I'll kind of pause and let the group throw out some other ideas or confirm any of these.
Hi, Scott. This is Libby Healy. I'll jump in and be first. Hi. One thing that I've been thinking about a lot and working with a lot. So I'm with Waters Corporation, and we have an international KCS program. And as I learn more and more about this, coaching in other countries is different. I think so looking at my APAC countries who are so amazing, and India and China, our KCS programs there just have a different flavor, and coaching there has a different flavor. And I would love an opportunity to hear from other people who are having success in international environments around how they did that. I think it's kind of been a mistake of mine to say, well, this is what worked in the United States. Let's try to redo this in Korea. Yeah. And it just doesn't work. It's not respectful, and it doesn't work. So yeah, anything that the group could share on that, I would love.
Yeah, maybe we can start with that. I think that's a really interesting perspective. And I know there's a lot of folks on here who have global knowledge management programs that might be able to.
I think the first thing, Libby, is that you recognize that, right? That you have the emotional intelligence to recognize that teams are different and you can't do the same thing from country to country to country. And I think that that's the first step in recognizing that. And then you do have to adapt and find out what works best for them. I think working locally with them. To Monique's point, though, there's still core things you have to stay true to, but you have some leeway to work within each nationality or each regional area to figure out what's the best way to adopt and make it usable and successful. So I think just recognizing it is a huge step.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would agree with that as well. I think you really do have to adapt and mold it to their culture. I mean, there's there are certainly countries that that I'm aware of where there are castes within business even, and that's a really difficult ceiling to crack through. If those individuals do not feel like they can speak up because it's just something that's been ingrained in them from get-go, that's a really tough environment for KCS. So I think that there's maybe this could be an offshoot of the consortium conversations, is how are we adapting KCS, or how could we adapt KCS for those kind of cultural considerations? It's an excellent point.
Right.
I think that's right.
Even
And
sharing knowledge that you fear your boss doesn't have would be considered rude and outrage and rude.
Insulting,
fear,
I think.
right. And me just being able to coach in that environment has been difficult.
it is, I think as Jeff implies, it's really important to try and combat some of the power differential that naturally exists in some cultures. And I remember listening to KCS training where somebody referred to the coach as being the analog of the police officer, right? And I think an aspect that we do want to try and export is to combat that power differential. We've seen this in the other CRM, crew resource management, in aviation, right? That the importance of trying to do that. The other thing that I've noticed is just sort of the playful aggressiveness and candor that I sometimes see in EMEA. And it's, the first time in Australia as well, the first time that I saw people really kind of getting into each other's faces, I was very concerned. And it's just like, they're like, back down, dude. This is how we work together. And so I think just recognizing that, and that's not something that might be as in your face as it would be in North America, is important.
And I think another sort of thing that I've seen internationally is more APAC is, the yes, and they're agreeing to it, but they're not really agreeing to it, right? And you really have to make sure you understand that and get to the core and, work behind the scenes to make sure they do.
One other thought I had is Jeff and Karen and Monique and I always think back on this video that Avaya did to launch the KM program. And I think marketing is so important, right? And now that I'm in a sales and marketing job, I guess I think even more, but if you could create sort of sub-marketing plans for each of the different, I'll call them cultures, right? Because this could be a different culture between IT and business, and really get them ramped up and excited about it. And I could see, something like that going a long ways. I mean, a little bit of flair, free t-shirts and stuff goes a long ways.
Swag.
Yeah, and I was going to swag.
Just don't send them American sizes. That doesn't work.
Yeah.
I was going to say that goes back to, I think, Monique's point about the OCM. Really, that is such an important part of any of these launches, is understanding the organizational change, the culture change. And, you have to adapt that to each of your regions, stakeholders, so forth. And where I've seen it done well, I thought Avaya did a good job of it. I had a client, Whirlpool was excellent. They did a great job when I worked with them. And I find that when they do that really well, they're more successful.
Hey, Sarah Feldman, you obviously interact with a lot of member companies. Have you seen any good ideas on this with global rollout?
Specific to coaching or all of the above?
Any of the above, yeah. But just to the culture point, let's say.
That is a good question. I'd have to think about that. I'll get back to the community. I don't want to speak without having a really informed answer there.
Okay.
I will say among our members, it's definitely a topic that is starting to bubble up, where I think folks are getting to a point where they're recognizing they need to talk about it more. And certainly no one has all the answers. So a conversation in progress.
Because I've seen it from a culture standpoint, even between support and, let's say, professional services, right? Where, I mean, I used to be in this model, right? Where it's like, well, do I really want to share this? I'm a valued resource that I want to be assigned to the, top projects. So I think it's a really interesting topic of not just coaching, but culture differences.
Scott, right when you were saying that, I was thinking, because in my head, I think a lot of times I was thinking about translation, language translation so much, and it's so much bigger than translation.
Yeah.
There's so much more to it than translation, but there is between different business areas as well. So often it's a language issue. People use it, like the word done means something different in every single business area that I work with. And so it's culture and language at the same time. And how do we create that shared knowledge-based space that can kind of have those dual poles?
Yeah, Libby, that's such a good point. I was almost going to say something really similar, which is that the conversations that I was talking about where people are saying there's a need that needs to be addressed, it is more focused on sort of the mechanics of how do we translate real-time knowledge generation globally? Are we using machine translation? How do we validate that? How do we adjust that? And I think the conversation that's happening here is it's just as big as an important and really does need to be talked about distinctly from the sort of mechanics and operational point of the translation.
When you're talking about change management, sorry, just one of the things you can do that's really simple when you're doing communications, but gets overlooked a lot if you're a US company, is not including US specific cultural references. Hitting a KCS home run doesn't mean anything across the world, right? So just being sensitive to that sometimes goes a long way to getting people to understand you're not just thinking US centric.
Yeah, I always tell all of my employers, like, even though I'm in the US, can we stop using so many sports and war analogies? Like, we're not out here to kill anybody and we're not going to the World Series either.
Well, sometimes even, movie or TV references aren't going to translate to.
Yeah, pop culture, right.
Mm-hmm.
When you see a lot of KCS programs, I love the examples I've seen where they really try and add personality to the rollout. They get mascots and awards and that kind of thing. And if that's all driven with some sort of US oriented references, that's important to keep in mind too.
Hey, Libby, one thing I think that's worked for me, and a lot of times you can find these things out sometimes upon reflection, but it just stresses the importance of getting the right coaches. I think especially when you take outside of kind of a North American context, I found out in the past that some of the biggest opposition to KCS prior to me getting involved ended up being the coach, who was absolutely amazing. And it was like, had I known that this particular person was so anti or opposition, there's no way that I would have allowed him to go as a coach. But I didn't know, and this person kind of came in and was sold on it, and they actually ended up culturally kind of defining how KCS would work in that part of the world. And I think, the success of coaching programs, there's nuance to it, but at the end of the day, the most important thing is picking the right people. So within that culture, if you get the right person, it'll be successful.
Ryan brings up a really good point. And I think, we talked about coaching kind of in the sort of the frontline sense, of frontline managers and sort of the direct leadership. But I think this really does start from the top. You'll hear that, woven through some of the KCS conversations. So one of the best examples of that coaching that, Ryan mentioned, I saw was from a VP that it didn't matter what email or chat came through. He was reminding people, you need to get that in the knowledge base. You need to include this in that process, right? Get that back to KCS. And when people saw that from 5 levels above them, like they immediately realized that we meant business about knowledge sharing. So super impactful.
Yeah, and that's interesting. I mean, I even remember when I sold this stuff back at Inference, we had our VP, and if she saw anything going around in emails, she would say, why isn't that going in the knowledge base? I mean, that was internally to us. I mean, hasn't changed in 25 years. If you have that leadership telling you or pointing out, and it becomes second nature, and reinforcing it is so important.
We did have a presentation just yesterday from the folks at PTC, and they talked about their new program that combines coaching and knowledge domain engineers, and they do a rotational sort of process where they bring folks into certain roles. For them, it's 4 months at a time, and then they go back. And that seemed like a really, a strong idea for a bunch of reasons, but specifically in terms of trying to have global sort of understanding. The folks get involved in different parts of the program and then go back and participate as knowledge workers. So it sort of strengthens the common understanding and opens lines of communication between back knowledge workers and then their sort of central coaching center. So that was an interesting idea.
Yeah, and going back to Karen, another point about making sure stuff is supported at an executive level. I'm always a fan of looking for silver linings of challenges. And so we're all going through this, COVID thing right now. But I remember maybe 10 or 15 years ago, there was sort of a large group of medical device manufacturers who all of their field service people with like Toshiba, Philips Healthcare, this sort of thing, that, all these people that go work on MRI machines and everything, they've been doing it their whole career and they were all about to retire. And so there was this huge push of essentially capturing knowledge before that retirement event happened. But, the executives don't use KCS or knowledge or, so we have to, going back to using the language that a certain culture responds to, we had to use language like, intellectual property and that sort of thing. And so I learned a lot about, sort of selling the idea to people using their language. And now we're in the Great Resignation, right? And I think we will miss a silver lining opportunity if we don't publicize these benefits to, executives. And again, maybe use slightly different language, but show them how important it is, especially at this point in time.
I'd say one of the things that we've done here at Ping is we've got a lot of executive sponsorship, and it's really been shifting of the mindset to, from the top down. And so our CEO on a pretty regular basis makes it a point to tell the company, documentation, knowledge base, that is the new marketing. And that's like a mantra that you hear here quite a bit. And so I think that's another thing to think of, it's not just, it's definitely shifting the terms, but looking at it at, how is this easy to understand and beneficial to the company? And we've seen a lot of positive feedback from everyone once we started seeing that shift.
Awesome. Well, maybe we can move on to another topic that Kate Leggett put in the chat, which I love. How do we all think that KCS is making life better for agents? It's a tough job with a decently low tenure at many organizations. And this is why I got so excited about KCS, because as I started doing agent side-by-sides and everything, they shared the same frustration that I think I certainly do. Is like, gosh, if only I could make this process better at my company, but the boss's boss's boss, will never know. So I love the fact that you could sort of, put a seed directly into the process. I'm curious to hear, maybe Kate can elaborate more on that. She probably has seen a lot of this, and we can open up for discussion.
Yeah, I'm really interested in understanding how KCS and other improvements actually affect the agents who are on the front lines doing the work. Do they end up staying longer? Or as the easy answers get captured and are easily accessible, are agents more focused on the harder work? Are they bringing their insights and analysis to the table? Is that work more fulfilling? As self-service gets better, is the profile or skills of agents changing? Anyways, just wanted to throw it out, and it's not necessarily a primary measure of success for a knowledge management program, but I was wondering if anyone was tying success of the knowledge management program to the impact to agents and their tenure.
So
And I'll add on that. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Monique.
Sorry. So I put a link in there that kind of addresses some of what you're asking, Kate. And it's a link to the KCS, the Great Enabler. So this was a great, this is the result of actually a working session where a lot of practitioners in the consortium came together and said, okay, what are the benefits that we're seeing? And it's broken down by what are the benefits for the organization, for the knowledge worker, and for the customer. So request to responder language. There's a ton in there. And I think one of the cool things too is when you're onboarding and training people, no matter who they are, they need to understand all these benefits. So especially the knowledge worker, because then they see how their contribution matters, right? And how it ties to the success of the company.
And I do think this almost should be a mandatory consideration for KCS, because I talk to people all the time who have never heard of it. And then they get super excited about this idea of just pushing a bunch of stuff to self-service. And then I ask them, knowing what the answer will probably be, well, what do you expect to happen to your call center? Oh, we'll just, be able to get rid of half of them or whatnot. And I have to go through the whole thing of what Kate mentioned of now you're going to have the more complex issues coming into the call center. That's not a bad thing, because going back to my product adoption passion, that means your customers are pushing the product and using it more. And thus, you will make more money off of handling and this completely surprises an unusually high number of people, in my opinion. And it's really hard for me to kind of sell them on the benefits of that.
One thing that we have started looking at, so Scott, you alluded to the Great Resignation and having new people come into support. And I'm not ashamed to say most of the new people coming into support are like 20 or 30 years younger than I am. They are kind of from a different time. We have field agents that go out into the field, into labs, working on mass spectrometers, working with our clients. They want everything on their phone.
Yeah.
They work on their phones exclusively. It's how they work the cases, and it's how they're accessing knowledge. And so quickly, we have jumped from everyone traveling with their laptop to everyone traveling with their phone. And part of it is technology, and part of it is just the people who are accessing the technology right now.
Yeah.
And for us, being able to have something that is in an agent's hand while they're in the field, that they can search, they can just do all of the things that they could do on their laptop, was critical for us in maintaining the buy-in that we have and maintaining the excitement with this new workforce that's coming in. So I think kind of as you're looking at the tool, also stay in touch with who is that user that's going to use the tool. And the moment they have a mobile action, are they just snapping it up and never looking back?
Yeah, that's a really good point, because some of those medical device manufacturers I mentioned earlier, as well as a company that did HVAC, but commercial stuff where you're down in the basement with like maybe almost like a hazmat suit on, they didn't have time to get out their Toshiba Toughbook and start typing away. We had a dictation thing that was just like, oh, the red button, is the problem. We need to update our knowledge. They are pushing the blue button, simple stuff like that. And nobody wanted to take that and transpose it. That's a boring job, but it's a job that produced like hundreds of thousands of ROI just by letting the field people remain in the field and not asking them to, when they're done and wanting to just lay down and be with their family to author knowledge,
Exactly, when they're like back collapsed in their hotel room.
Yeah.
To say, okay, now get out your laptop.
Yeah.
So making sure that, that you are in alignment with the new workforce that is coming in.
And I mean, we've seen a ton of people with career paths within KCS as well, right? So that's always been interesting to me.
Absolutely. And I think building out the WIFM to include that career path for us has been so important, because we've had so many coaches that have said, well, what's next? I've coached for 4 years now. What's next on this? And I'm like, really? Has nobody explained to you what's next? So much is next.
Yeah.
And so really kind of keeping that fresh and snappy for the people that are coming in.
Well, one trap to fall in is, to really create the construct of value simply by the volume of assisted support cases, because as long as software is released, as long as hardware is sold, there's cases. And I think, if you look at the methodology and people look at KCS either new or been around for years, it's all about, how do you reduce case volume? And I'm not sure it's possible sometimes to reduce case volume. I think your overall engagement going up, I actually mentioned during Christina's talk, because this is kind of part and parcel with the way that we've explained value to our agents is, the complexity of the case. Kate, you mentioned that. I think if they see complexity going up, they're not solving the same thing every single day. They see value in that. They understand that the cases aren't going to go anywhere necessarily, but it's really about the overall engagement. Can you push up and contact ratios? And I think for whatever reason, that's a misconception. People come in to KCS and they make it all about the reduction of cases to elimination. And I don't think that that's possible. I think if you held static your products, you never released any sort of changes, and your company just went out of business, yeah, cases would stop coming in. But that's not the world we live in. The world we live in keeps getting faster and faster. There's nuance, there's interoperability, there's all kinds of things. So I think if you really focus on simply case volume with KCS, you're setting yourselves up for long-term failure. But if you can talk about, this is really an engagement strategy, this is about dealing with complexity, this is about learning fast, this is about seeing new stuff, the agents get that instantly. And that's an easy sell, and you're set up for long-term success. So I think it's that is a major mistake a lot of KCS programs and initiatives take on, as they focus way too much on the case volume. I think you should just almost ignore it and think about issues, not cases.
Yeah, and as we've moved beyond support, I've had the pleasure of my current and last couple employers use KCS, for sales engineering, for professional services, and that has nothing to do with these common metrics that we talk about. But I can tell you, my SE team and my customer success team appear to be much happier now that they don't spend half of their day chasing down Bill, refers them to Jane, refers them to John. It's just in some sort of knowledge repository. And go back to the point of, in some jobs, your knowledge is all you can bill for. We give them credit for that, right? And so they're listed very clearly on the article, and then they're brought into a complicated escalation with an implementation, or POC in the sales process or whatever. So it's the best of both worlds.
Yeah, in terms of the satisfaction for the people doing the work, I think focusing on these very real pain points, it's sort of a negative way of getting at it, but it's really important in the sense that if you talk to people in organizations that are helping other people, they are always universally frustrated about how hard it is to get the information they need to do their jobs. And they are universally frustrated that they don't have the time and space to really dig in and engage and do the kind of work that they'd like to do in helping customers, because they always have the next one to get to. And so to me, a real message about KCS is, this is a thing that lets you do your job and takes advantage of all of the good things that you bring to the table, rather than just have you always be, scrambling. And that's a real satisfaction driver.
Hey, gang, if I could interrupt the conversation real quickly, because a few folks are dropping. We want to do one last poll question, if Jeff can pull that up. And it's basically, what time frame do you all think would be best for continuing these? We've done 2 hours to kick them off, but we could certainly shorten it. We could meet in the middle at 90 minutes, that sort of thing. So if we could just do a quick housekeeping there, and that'll help us better plan for the future.
So while we're doing that, Scott, I was going to go back to the Great Resignation, and it's not so much about KCS, but adoption. One thing that we did at Xerox and we're doing here now is we've incorporated knowledge into our training. So I have to do change management training once a year. And instead of putting all that in the training material, we go through the process, but we're linking out and telling them to go look at knowledge articles. Mm-hmm. And we do an exam, so they have to, go look at those articles, but we're showing them and reinforcing that the content's there. We're teaching them how to go search, right? And then it reinforces that when I have an issue, I can go, or I have a question, I haven't done that process in a long time, go to the knowledge base and look at it. So we're trying to, work with the LMS folks and, training and reinforce that knowledge is just part, even when you're learning, to go to the knowledge base and utilize it.
We
So
did that at AARP also. We spent the last year doing that, pulling out real information out of the LMS. And
Yeah.
so all of the actual actionable information is in the knowledge base. And it did two things. It made the training far more evergreen, because when you train something, information changes, but the concepts stay the same. So the knowledge, it's evergreen. We don't have to update the pre-recorded LMS or any of the visuals. It's just search. So it did one thing, it made it evergreen. And then the other thing it did, it helped the agents to feel more confident that whatever the question is, they are very comfortable with searching and finding. And we had them search the production knowledge base, not the training sandbox.
Right. And that's exactly what we do too. Thank you.
Yeah. So huge, 2 thumbs up for that strategy. If anybody's not doing that, I think it's easy to convince people there's benefit to be had.
Yeah, no, it's been very productive with us, and our training, it does make it evergreen for the year. I mean, we do a lot of changes to our processes and our tools. So we have to, and we have FCC regulations where we have to do it every year, and we do have to update it, but we don't have to worry about a new person coming on and taking the training and it being outdated. And again, they feel confident they're going to find information in the knowledge base, and that goes beyond just that particular work stream. I mean, then they're ready to use it for their agent related work.
Yeah, I agree. The large majority of the authors at UKG are frontline support or some type of personal interaction that they have with the customer. So those folks taking cases, taking calls, or supporting our customers, like physically, it's several thousand of them. And the training for knowledge is baked into the training for case management, but I did pick up a couple of nuggets here. But my knowledge manager and on my team, and then one of the training managers for support, came up with the idea of creating a scavenger hunt for the agents, and took real time, like, this is stuff you're going to get on the phones. Here's a list of questions you need to solve for. And part of their training ahead of time, Kristen, to your point, was navigating the community, navigating knowledge, understanding search and how it works, and how to get the very best out of it. And Scott, totally aside from your current employer, I will plug Coveo all day long. Our experience with them is off the charts. And so the two things combined makes for a really fun, like, training time for the students, and they get to do it on their own time, and they get to help each other. And it's a great hands-on, this is what my real job is going to be, except this is kind of for fun, and I might get a $50 gift card if I'm the first person to complete it or whatever. And so the scavenger hunt, it seems a little kitschy, but it works. And the training team gets to make the questions highly relevant for what's happening in the moment on the support floor. So I'm really affirmed in that. So I'm glad to be a part of this discussion. I can take that right back to the training team and my knowledge manager and say, keep doing it. It's working. It will keep working. So
in my previous organization, my favorite example of sort of knowing that the team had really embraced this sort of knowledge first thing as a culture was that the expectation was you would look for anything in the knowledge base first. But the support team was very active on Slack. So if someone asked a question in the team Slack group and then someone responded with a link to a knowledge base article, that was sort of like the ultimate shame, but people had fun with it, right? We didn't take it too seriously. So we made sure to reinforce, like, still always ask your question, right? Or first and foremost, we're supporting our customers. If you have a question and you need help, ask in the Slack group. But if you ask a question that is already captured in the knowledge base, you might get shamed a little bit for it. And it was fun, right? But embraced by the team.
You know, it's
So
funny, I have
true.
something similar when we do, like when my team does RFP responses. I get fairly upset if every answer isn't just linked to documentation on our website, and that offends some prospective clients. Like, no, you know, I don't want to go read this stuff. And my perspective is, well, if you're buying software that only one person knows the answer to, or maybe it's not even the correct answer, versus, you know, having confidence in reference to the standard library. But I mean, that's just probably a byproduct of how my career path started in, you know, KCS implementation instead of sales. But it's just so funny because I'm the same way. It's like, I hate one-off conversations. It needs to be a link to something that everybody can agree on and share.
Libby, quick, sign them up.
There you go.
Coach.
You guys, at my former company, we used to kind of enable and empower some of the more advanced folks in knowledge work that were in support to help give the presentation and kind of the sales pitch for knowledge. And it worked really well. But one of the things they came up with, because Slack was, you know, huge, Sarah, it was one of the agents that created a slide. It had some crazy visual on it that he came up with, but it says search for Slack later. And I'm like, perfect, kind of a spin, you know, like search early, search often, you know. But like that, they were all so guilty of just pinging. And I like the no response, but respond with a link. So that's what they would respond with was, did you search first Slack later? I always thought that was great.
Yeah,
And that the support agent came up with it was awesome, even better.
That is wonderful.
Yeah, and I think it's so important to let it still be kind of a lighthearted thing, right? Like, it's not for death. We, like, KCS, like anything, is a practice. It's always a work in progress.
Yes.
We're not expecting you to be perfect all the time. Let's just all agree that we know what the North Star is. We have a common goal. And when we slip up here and there, we're here to help each other get right back on track.
What was so beautiful about the support agent doing that is those folks that embraced KCS and the coaching and how knowledge work was support. Those were the natural leaders and the natural influencers on the team. And those are the folks that unfortunately have the shortest lifespan in support, you know, 18 months to 2 years. And before you know it, they're leaders, they're managing people, they're managing trainers, they're over in product or QA. And it's hard to nurture that kind of excitement. You know, you kind of, that's hard. That's a hard thing.
Just to emphasize what Sarah is saying, I think that, you know, one of the things that we've seen to tie the Great Resignation and coaching together, one of the things that we have always seen is that the people who are naturally the right KCS coaches, the kind of people Ryan was talking about, are also the most attractive people to be promoted or to be snitched by somebody else or to find a new opportunity. I think that's even more true today. So what one of my clients shared with me recently was that they made a conscious practice of just oversubscribing the ranks of coaches by 20%, knowing that they were going to have to backfill. And
Just
I think
having more.
Just knowing, right? And that's a tough discipline, but I think we've seen a lot of times where the lack of availability of coaching at, you know, 6 months down the road is really causing problems.
Do you guys have like a sweet spot for a ratio of coaches to agents? When I'm thinking about, I'm on the phone or I'm working a case, someone that has like direct contact with a customer and is responsible for authoring, which at our company it is the case. If you're in support, knowledge is part of your job. And you know, the time issue is really a thing right now for our folks because call volume is high. But in addition to that, coaching is like, it's like, I don't have time to do calls, do knowledge and coach, but it's, you know, chicken and the egg, right? We all preaching, to the choir, of course. But have you guys found a sweet spot, especially in a larger organization, of a ratio of coaches to authors? That's something I'm dealing with on my team right now. I'm part of a company that merged a little over a year ago. We literally doubled our support staff, where there's about 600-700 each. So now we're over 1,000, and we've had a lot of attrition, and we have some folks that are just looking around and not as focused as they used to be. And so having peer influence from a coaching perspective is really important, because my knowledge team is small, and we rely on those coaches to carry the torch, kind of out there on the field and on the phone. So as we're reorganizing and ourselves and trying to really find that sweet spot, have you guys come across that? Is it 1 to 8, 1 to 10, 1 to 20? Does it just depend? And if it depends, what have you found to be your dependencies?
I don't have the answer to that, but I just want to pile on to say, in my experience, having gone through this deployment of KCS, you never have enough coaches at the beginning of the process when you need them the most, and then eventually as you need them less, you get more of them, right? It's a bit of a irony to the whole KCS evolution that that I've seen, that's a challenge. So I would just suggest that the earlier you can get as many coaches as possible on. I don't know if there is a ratio. I don't know, Monique, do you guys have an idea in mind?
Yes. So early on for adoption, definitely try to get as many coaches as you can. And we started with a very low ratio 1 to 3, because now it's not just your knowledge worker that's learning, it's your coach that's also learning how to become a coach. And then what happens is that organically grows, and they're able to pick up more coachees. And so I think, again, depending on the complexity and everything, but I've found no matter where I've been, anything more than 6 is too much.
Okay.
And then if you have a large coaching base, then you start thinking about I'm mixing my words up here, lead coaches, because, for example, we have 100 coaches across the globe, and there's no way that me and Arco can manage 100 coaches. And so we have 27 lead coaches now coach the coaches. And so that's much more manageable. Yeah.
So our support teams max out at like 10 each or so. And that's kind of been the de facto. Do we have at least one per team? And the teams are kind of mixed, where we've got some folks are authoring and that's it. Some folks are authoring and technical approvers, and then some folks are doing authoring, approval, and publishing, and those folks are also coaches. So there might be a mix. And so if we don't have one per, then we try to get that one coach partnered with the team next door, they're as closely as possible. Some of it is just the sheer volume of agents. It's not each team is doing something different. It's just there are a lot of them. And so that's been probably one of the hardest things to try to ensure, is that coverage. It's like my knowledge manager keeps a spreadsheet, but it is always changing. It's like, oh, that person left. Oh, that person moved. Oh, that person has COVID. Oh, So we cannot, it's almost hard to keep up with. So I like your idea of the leads, and that is like adds another level of kind of prestige to the title, or to the level of work that they're doing. That's a great idea. Thank you.
And lead coaches, you can let them do, so a lot of times people will say, I'm just kind of burnt out on coaching. Like I've done this for several years and I'm just kind of burnt out. What's next? Lead coaches, they start putting them in charge of telling a story with numbers. Let them start learning more project management and practicing their project management skills, which folks in support just don't get to do that often. Like we let them take these wonderful LinkedIn learning classes, and then they don't get to practice any of it. So, and that can entice them to stay in support a little bit longer. If they're actually building some skills and getting to do something new, they might say, hey, I'll do this for another 6 months. You know, and so you can start kind of extending your runway of your tenure a little bit that way too.
That's really great. And it's been some of those support agents in the past, Libby, that have come up with like some campaign idea or some like rush of there's some issue that we need to rally around. Like when COVID came, we had to get all of the content related to PTO updated. Well, it was those agents that like, we were like, we'll curate it for you. We'll make sure all the stuff is tagged, but they like got to it all and updated it all and then shared it all out on the community. And yeah, you're totally right. We're gonna look a little harder at those folks that are coaching today and see if we can entice them with some more responsibility.
And I would also say one last thing. If you identify potential new coaches as early as you can and put that bug in their ear and say, you know what, if you can get these skills up and running, you are so good with people. I see you as an amazing coach. Really dedicate yourself to this. And there is something new right around the corner for you. Get you off the phone for a little while. Like get them excited about it. We all know what entices them.
So true.
Get them excited about it and you'll have people lining up for the job.
I think you're right.
Thank you all for the great discussion. I have this rule. I like to end meetings a couple minutes early so that we all have meetings that end late. And I appreciate everybody's attendance. I want to especially thank Jeff and Monique and Christina, as well as everybody else who joined in at the end. Libby, I have not done any sort of random drawing. I have just selfishly chosen you as the recipient of the Logitech Stream Cam.
No way!
And then I think, oh no, there's Ryan. Sorry, your videos keep moving around on my screen. So Ryan, Coveo's doing this fun thing. This is the only time I'll mention Coveo because it's a free giveaway for me. We're giving away some famous footwear shoes because they're one of our clients, and we got this like no strings attached marketing campaign. So there's literally no strings attached here. Ryan has already bought Coveo. I'm not trying to sell him anything, but I'd love to send you a pair of free shoes courtesy of Uncle Louie, our CEO. Awesome. So I'll reach out to you both on those two things. So
my lucky day. Thank you.
Well, thank you all.
Air Jordans.
Yeah. Well, thank you all. I'll be in touch, and it looks like the next time we'll probably go 90 minutes. That was the resounding preference. So, okay, we'll have a wonderful day.
Scott. Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.